Amelia Pratt thought she knew every shadow in her husband's life. 8 years of marriage should mean something, right? But as she navigated the winding dirt road leading to Jason's camping spot that Friday evening, she had no idea she was about to discover just how many secrets can hide in plain sight. Hello, my beautiful story family. Before we dive deeper into Amelia's incredible story, a tale of betrayal, hidden fortune, and an unthinkable fight for justice, I'd like to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. And honestly, if this story touches you the way I think it will, you may want to subscribe to our channel because what happens next will leave you speechless. The late afternoon sun filtered through the towering pine trees lining the narrow mountain road. She'd packed Jason's favorite camping foods in insulated containers, gourmet Esmores ingredients with artisan marshmallows, craft beer from the brewery he loved, and the homemade beef stew he always requested. Her trunk also held an overnight bag with the navy silk pajama set he'd bought her last Valentine's Day, still with tags on. She'd been planning this surprise for 3 weeks. Jason had been taking these solo camping trips every month for the past 2 years. He always came back relaxed but distant, smelling like wood smoke and lake water. He'd kiss her forehead, shower, and fall into bed. She'd told herself he needed these breaks from his demanding job as a senior financial analyst. He worked 70-hour weeks managing portfolios worth tens of millions. He deserved time to unwind. But lately, something felt different. He'd started password protecting his phone with his thumb facing away from her. He'd stopped asking her to join him for dinner with colleagues. And last month, she'd found a second phone charger in his gym bag, one she didn't recognize. When she'd asked about it, he'd said it was a backup for work trips. She'd believed him because that's what wives do, right? They trust. The lakeside cabin came into view. A modern cedar and glass structure with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the shimmering water. Jason's Jeep was parked in the gravel clearing, just as expected. But beside it sat an unfamiliar silver SUV with out-of-state plates. Amelia's stomach tightened slightly, but she pushed the feeling away. Maybe he'd invited a colleague. Maybe it was another camper using the shared access road. She grabbed the food containers and walked toward the front entrance. The cabin sat eerily quiet, too quiet. Usually Jason would have music playing or the portable speaker on. She reached for her keys, but decided to knock first, not wanting to startle him if he had company. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. That's when she heard it. A woman's laugh, light and carefree, drifting from the deck that wrapped around to the back of the cabin. Amelia's heart started pounding, but her feet moved forward anyway, carrying her along the stone path that led to the rear of the property overlooking the lake. She should have announced herself. She should have called out. But something made her stay quiet, made her peer around the corner of the cabin before making her presence known. And there they were. Jason sat in one of the oversized Adirondack chairs, his camping gear abandoned against the wooden railing. A woman with long dark hair sat close beside him, his arm draped around her shoulders in a gesture of easy intimacy. They both held wine glasses that caught the golden light of the setting sun. Amelia froze, her photographer's eye capturing every devastating detail with perfect clarity. The way Jason's thumb traced circles on the woman's bare shoulder. The way she leaned into him like she belonged there. The way the lake shimmered behind them like a postcard, beautiful and mocking. She stood there, hidden by the cabin's corner, unable to move. Unable to breathe. The insulated containers felt heavy in her hands, weighted with all the lies she'd been too trusting to see. "When are you finally leaving her?" the woman asked, her voice carrying clearly across the deck. Jason sighed, and Amelia watched him take a long drink of wine before answering. "After the promotion. Once my bonus clears, she can't touch it. My lawyer's been very clear about the timing." The words hit Amelia like physical blows. Promotion. Bonus. Lawyer. He'd been planning this. Planning to leave her while making sure she got nothing. "You've been saying that for months, Jason," the woman continued, playing with the collar of his shirt. "I'm not getting any younger. We've been together for over 2 years now. 2 years. The same length of time he'd been taking these monthly solo camping trips. The same 2 years Amelia had been the fool who'd packed his bags and kissed him goodbye. Her hands started shaking, and she carefully set the food containers down on the ground before she dropped them. The photographer in her, the part of herself she'd buried to support Jason's career, suddenly awakened with crystal clarity. She pulled her phone from her jacket pocket, moving as quietly as possible. Her fingers found the camera app, and she started documenting everything. Click. Jason kissing the woman's temple. Click. His hand sliding down her back. Click. The woman laughing at something he whispered. She took at least 20 photographs from different angles, making sure their faces were clear, making sure the cabin was visible in the background. Then she switched to video, recording 3 full minutes of their conversation. About their relationship, about how long they'd been together, about Jason's plans to handle the divorce to protect his assets. Her hands shook as she held the phone, but she forced herself to stay calm and focused. This evidence, this documentation of betrayal, would be her weapon. When she had enough to destroy him, Amelia backed away slowly, careful not to make a sound. She made it to her car without them hearing her, left the food containers abandoned on the ground, and sat behind the wheel staring at nothing. Her marriage was over, but Jason didn't know it yet. And that, Amelia realized as she started the engine and began the long drive home, was going to be her only advantage. Amelia drove home in a fog of shock, the 3-hour journey passing in fragments she couldn't quite piece together. Her photographer's mind, the part of herself she'd buried for 8 years, had somehow kicked into gear, working methodically even as her heart shattered into pieces she wasn't sure could ever be reassembled. 2 years. He'd been lying for 2 years. The roads blurred together. Mountain highways gave way to suburban streets, then to the tree-lined avenue where their house stood. The picture-perfect colonial with the wraparound porch and professionally landscaped yard. Jason had insisted on this neighborhood, this house, this life that looked so flawless from the outside. She pulled into the driveway after midnight, the house dark and empty. Jason wouldn't be back until Sunday evening. That gave her approximately 42 hours to gather evidence, build a plan, and figure out how to survive what came next. Inside, Amelia moved through the rooms as if seeing them for the first time. The life Jason had built looked perfect, magazine-worthy, even. But as she looked around with new eyes, she realized something devastating. She was never truly in the frame. The photos on the walls were mostly of Jason at various career milestones. The artwork reflected his taste. The furniture, the color schemes, even the books on the shelves, all his choices, his preferences, his vision of what their life should look like. Where was she in any of this? Her hands were still shaking, but she forced them steady. She had work to do. Jason's home office was on the first floor, a space he'd declared off-limits to her, so he could focus without distractions. She'd accepted this boundary like she'd accepted everything else, mistaking his control for consideration. Now she stood in the doorway, looking at the mahogany desk and filing cabinets with different eyes. She started with the desk drawers. The first contained the usual office supplies, pens, notepads, business cards. The second held files she pulled out one by one, photographing each page with her phone. Bank statements for accounts she'd never heard of. Investment portfolios in Jason's name only. Property deeds that made her stomach drop. He bought a condo downtown 2 years ago and never mentioned it. 2 years. Everything circled back to 2 years. In the bottom drawer, wedged behind a box of envelopes, her fingers found something that didn't belong. A phone. Not Jason's iPhone with its distinctive black case, but a cheap Android burner, the kind people used when they didn't want to be tracked. Amelia's heart hammered as she pressed the power button. The phone lit up, no password, no security at all. Either Jason was arrogant enough to think she'd never find it, or stupid enough to believe she'd never look. She opened the Messages app. The first conversation was with Vanessa, presumably. The texts went back 18 months, a timeline of escalating intimacy. Missing you. Can't wait for next weekend. You're all I think about. Amelia scrolled through them clinically, documenting everything with photos. But Vanessa wasn't the only woman. There was Rachel, Miami, with texts from 6 months ago. Jessica, Phoenix, from a year before that. 3 other women saved only by first names, their conversations varying in length, but all sharing the same tone of deception and hidden meetings. Jason hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been running a systematic operation of betrayal, juggling multiple women while coming home to the wife he'd systematically diminished into invisibility. Amelia set the burner phone aside carefully, exactly where she'd found it. She needed Jason to believe everything was normal until she was ready to strike. She moved to the filing cabinet, pulling out folders with hands that no longer shook. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder and more focused. She photographed tax returns, investment statements, and insurance policies. Then she found the prenuptial agreement, the one Jason had pressured her to sign 3 weeks before their wedding, claiming his lawyer insisted on it, just as a formality. She'd been so in love, so trusting. She'd signed without reading it carefully, without getting her own attorney to review it. Reading it now, she understood why. The terms were brutal. In the event of divorce, she'd leave the marriage with almost nothing. Any assets acquired during the marriage would remain Jason's property. She'd waive rights to alimony, to their home, to his retirement accounts. The agreement even specified that any business interests would be his alone. Her photography career, the one she'd been building before they married, the one that had been gaining momentum with gallery showings and commercial contracts. She'd abandoned it at Jason's encouragement, suggestion really, delivered with such seeming concern, because he'd said his career required a wife who could focus on supporting him, on hosting dinners and managing their household. She'd believed he had her best interests at heart. Now she saw it clearly. He'd been systematically trapping her, making her financially dependent, legally vulnerable, professionally irrelevant. But Jason had made mistakes. She found documents with her forged signature, transfers of assets she'd never authorized, changes to account titles she'd never agreed to. That prenup might not hold up in court if she could prove he'd obtained it through pressure and deception, especially now that she had evidence of his forged documents. Amelia uploaded everything to a secure cloud storage account she created on the spot. Then she Googled divorce attorney financial abuse and began taking notes. Catherine Sterling's name appeared repeatedly in articles about high-stakes divorces involving financial manipulation. Amelia bookmarked her law firm's website, composed a draft email marked urgent, and saved it to send Monday morning. By 3 a.m., she documented every piece of evidence she could find in Jason's office. But there was one more thing she needed to do. She went to the garage, to the dusty corner where Jason had made her store, then later sell, most of her photography equipment. He'd claimed they needed the money for house repairs, for his business expenses, for a dozen other things that had somehow never materialized into actual needs. But Amelia had kept a few pieces. Hidden them, really, in boxes labeled holiday decorations that Jason would never bother opening. She pulled out her backup camera body, her favorite 50mm lens, her portable light kit. Holding them felt like recovering lost limbs. Parts of herself she'd amputated to fit into Jason's vision of who she should be. The camera felt right in her hands. Natural. Like coming home. She carried the equipment inside, cleaned each piece carefully, and charged the batteries. Her photographer's eye, dormant for so long, began seeing compositions again. Light and shadow, truth and lies captured in frame. Dawn broke gray and cold. Amelia made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, researching divorce law, financial abuse, and how to protect herself from a spouse who'd been systematically preparing to destroy her. Sunday crawled by in planning and preparation. She rehearsed how she'd act when Jason came home. The devoted wife, the trusting partner, the woman who suspected nothing. At 6 p.m., she heard his Jeep in the driveway. Amelia had made his favorite meal, pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables. She'd set the table, poured wine, and put on the dress he'd once said he liked. Every detail perfect, every gesture calculated. Jason came through the door looking relaxed and happy, the flush of fresh air and deception on his face. He kissed her forehead, just like always, and smiled. "Something smells amazing," he said, setting his duffel bag by the stairs. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "I wanted to," Amelia replied, and was surprised by how normal her voice sounded. How steady. "I missed you." The lie tasted like poison, but she delivered it perfectly. They ate dinner, making small talk about his camping trip. Jason described the weather, the fishing, the peaceful solitude. Each lie rolled off his tongue smoothly, practiced and polished. Amelia smiled and nodded, asking follow-up questions, playing her role flawlessly. This was her performance, the most important one of her life. After dinner, Jason showered and went to bed early, claiming exhaustion from the drive. Amelia cleaned the kitchen methodically, then climbed the stairs. But she didn't go to their bedroom. She went to the guest room instead, closing the door quietly behind her. She couldn't share a bed with him tonight. Couldn't lie beside a stranger who wore her husband's face. She'd made her decision during those long hours of documentation and planning. Jason would pay for every lie, every manipulation, every year he'd stolen from her. But he wouldn't know she was coming until it was too late. Amelia lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, no longer the trusting wife who'd driven to that cabin with homemade stew and hope. That woman was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone angrier, someone who'd finally remembered she'd once been an artist, a professional, a woman with her own dreams. And that woman was going to take back everything Jason had stolen, starting tomorrow. Monday morning, Amelia sat in the sleek downtown office of Catherine Sterling, attorney at law, with her accordion folder of evidence and a determination that surprised even herself. Catherine Sterling was exactly what the online reviews had promised: sharp-eyed, direct, and radiating the kind of controlled intensity that came from years of courtroom battles. She was in her mid-40s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun and a gaze that seemed to see through polite facades straight to the truth beneath. "Walk me through everything," Catherine said, gesturing to the folder. Amelia did. She showed the photographs from the cabin, played the video of Jason's conversation with Vanessa, then laid out the financial documents, the burner phone evidence, the forged signatures, the prenuptial agreement signed under pressure. Catherine examined each piece with the focused attention of someone who'd seen countless variations of betrayal, but never stopped being thorough. When she finally looked up, something like respect flickered in her expression. "Your documentation is exceptional," she said. "Most clients come to me with suspicions and emotions. You've come with evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy." She tapped the photos of the forged signatures. "This prenup won't hold up. Not with proof of fraud and financial abuse." "Can we win?" Amelia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Win?" Catherine's smile was sharp. "Mrs. Pratt, we're going to destroy him. But I need you to understand, it will get ugly. He'll fight. He'll lie. He'll try to paint you as unstable, vindictive, a gold digger. Can you handle that?" Amelia thought about 8 years of making herself smaller, of abandoned dreams and forged signatures and systematic control disguised as protection. "Yes," she said. "I can handle it." "Good." Catherine pulled out a legal pad. "First, we're bringing in Rebecca Torres, a forensic accountant who specializes in hidden assets. If your husband has been this calculating, there's more we haven't found yet. Second, you maintain absolute normalcy at home. He cannot suspect anything until we're ready to file. Can you do that?" The performance. Amelia had already started it the night before, smiling through dinner while her heart was ice. "I can do that." "Then let's begin." Rebecca Torres turned out to be a woman in her 30s with sharp features, sharper instincts, and a gift for finding money people thought they'd successfully hidden. She arrived at Catherine's office 2 days later with a laptop and an expression that suggested she viewed financial deception as a personal insult. "I've started with what you provided," Rebecca said, spreading printouts across the conference table. "And Mrs. Pratt, your husband isn't just hiding assets. He's been systematically moving money for at least 3 years, possibly longer." The numbers she revealed made Amelia dizzy. Jason had approximately $580,000 in hidden assets, accounts in his name only, investments Amelia had never known existed, and that downtown condo now valued at $340,000. He manipulated documents to transfer joint assets into his sole name, Rebecca continued, her finger tracing lines on a financial flowchart. "Made you financially dependent while building his own fortress." Classic financial abuse pattern. But there was something else in Rebecca's expression. Something darker. "What is it?" Catherine asked, reading the accountant's hesitation. Rebecca pulled out another set of documents. "I found irregularities in his employer's accounts. Large transfers that don't match his salary or known investments. I flagged them for further investigation, but..." She looked at Amelia directly. "I think your husband has been embezzling from his company." Approximately $800,000 over 3 years. The room went silent. Some of these accounts, Rebecca added quietly, have your forged signature. If this becomes a criminal investigation, they might try to implicate you as an accomplice. Amelia's hands clenched in her lap. Not only had Jason stolen from her, he'd been stealing from his employer and trying to frame her for it. Can we prove she had no knowledge? Catherine's voice was sharp, protective. Yes. The forensic evidence is clear. She had no access to these accounts, no knowledge of their existence. But we need to move carefully. Very carefully. At home, Amelia maintained the facade with an actress's precision. She made Jason's favorite meals, asked about his day, smiled when he kissed her forehead before leaving for work each morning. The performance was exhausting, but she'd learned something important. She was better at deception than she'd ever imagined. Jason suspected nothing. He was too confident in the trap he'd built, too certain that Amelia was the compliant wife who'd never question him. He had no idea she was building her own trap, brick by brick, photograph by photograph. Her lifeline during those surreal weeks was Dana Mitchell, her college roommate who'd moved to the city 2 years ago. They'd lost touch. Jason had discouraged the friendship, claiming Dana was too negative about their relationship. But when Amelia reached out, Dana responded immediately. They met for coffee at a cafe across town, far from anywhere Jason might see them. I knew something was wrong, Dana said after Amelia explained everything. The way he controlled your career, isolated you from friends. I tried to say something once, remember? At your birthday party 5 years ago. Amelia did remember. Jason had been so angry afterward, so convincing in his arguments that Dana was jealous, trying to cause problems. She'd let the friendship fade rather than fight about it. I'm sorry I didn't listen, Amelia said. Don't apologize. You're listening now. Dana's expression turned fierce. What do you need? Help rebuilding my photography career. I don't even know where to start. Dana, who worked in marketing, smiled. I know exactly where to start. Your old work was incredible, Amelia. Let's remind the world of that. Within a week, Dana had helped Amelia set up a professional website, update her portfolio with the few pieces she still had, and reach out to former gallery contacts. The responses surprised her. Several gallery owners remembered her work fondly, expressed disappointment when she disappeared from the scene, and showed genuine interest in seeing new material. Amelia began shooting again. At first, she could only work when Jason was at the office or traveling. She'd take her camera to parks, to urban landscapes, to anywhere she could capture images. Her work had changed, become rawer, more emotional. She photographed shadows and hidden spaces, truth obscured by beautiful facades, the gaps between what people showed and what they were. One series in particular consumed her. Images of reflections and distortions, of faces in windows that showed both the person and what lay behind them. She called it Invisible, and posted it to social media on a whim. It went viral within 48 hours. Messages poured in from people who saw their own experiences in her work. Women especially, who recognized the feeling of being made invisible, of having their reality distorted by someone else's manipulations. A local gallery owner named Dominic Ashford reached out, asking about a possible show. For the first time in years, Amelia felt alive behind the lens. She made one more strategic decision, confiding in Jason's sister Grace. They met for lunch at Grace's request, something about checking in since they hadn't talked in months. Grace was 2 years younger than Jason, a pediatric nurse with their mother's warm eyes and their father's direct manner. I'm divorcing Jason, Amelia said, deciding honesty was the only option. And I need you to know why. She showed Grace some of the evidence, not everything, but enough. The affair, the hidden money, the forged signatures. Grace's face went through several expressions before settling on disgust. That son of a bitch, she said quietly. I'm so sorry, Amelia. You're not surprised? Jason's always been selfish. Competitive. He had to be the best at everything, control everything. I hoped marriage would change him, but... Grace shook her head. Our dad was the same way. Controlled every aspect of our mother's life until she got sick and couldn't take it anymore. She left him when I was 16. Amelia hadn't known that. If you need anything, Grace continued, testimony, character statements, whatever, I'm on your side. Jason needs to face consequences for once in his life. Rebecca's investigation continued to uncover new horrors. Jason had been embezzling systematically, using complex schemes to hide the money. He'd created shell accounts, falsified expense reports, and forged Amelia's signature on documents that could implicate her in his crimes. His company doesn't know yet, Rebecca reported during a conference call. But they will. This is too large to hide forever. When it comes out, Catherine said, the criminal charges will be separate from the divorce. But they'll help our case. Proof of his character, his willingness to commit fraud. The evidence was building. Jason's fortress of deception was actually a house of cards, and Amelia held the wind that would blow it down. But first, she needed to rebuild herself. She booked her first photography session in 10 years, a family portrait for one of Dana's co-workers. Standing behind the camera, directing poses, capturing genuine moments of connection, Amelia felt a piece of herself click back into place. This was who she'd been before Jason. This was who she could be again. The session led to another, then another. Word spread about the photographer with the incredible eye for emotion, for capturing truth beneath the surface. 2 months after discovering Jason's affair, Amelia took the biggest step. She secured a small studio space in an arts district across town. It was modest, just one room with good natural light and enough space for a shooting area and a small office, but it was hers. She signed the lease with her maiden name, Amelia Brooks. Standing in the empty studio, looking at the light streaming through the tall windows, Amelia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Jason thought he'd trapped her, made her dependent, destroyed her ability to survive without him. He was about to learn just how wrong he'd been. The frame was rebuilding, but this time, Amelia was the one holding the camera, and she'd make damn sure every detail was captured perfectly. Catherine filed the divorce papers on a Tuesday morning, timing it perfectly so Jason would be served at his office during a routine workday. Amelia had moved her essential belongings to Dana's apartment the night before: clothes, her camera equipment, important documents. She wouldn't be home when the bomb detonated. The call came at 11:47 a.m. Amelia was in her studio, editing photos from a maternity session, when her phone started buzzing. Jason's name flashed on the screen once, twice, 3 times. She silenced it and kept working. The text started immediately after. What the hell is this? Call me right now. You can't be serious. Amelia, answer your phone. She blocked his number and returned to her editing. Let him rage into the void. By evening, he'd tried calling from the office line, from numbers she didn't recognize, from his mother's phone. Amelia ignored them all. Catherine had been explicit. No contact, no engagement, no explanation. Let him spiral. The next morning, Jason showed up at her studio. Amelia was photographing product shots for a local boutique when she heard the commotion outside. Through the window, she saw Jason's Jeep parked illegally on the curb, saw him striding toward her door with the righteous fury of a man who believed he'd been wronged. She'd prepared for this. She pressed the panic button on the security system Dana had insisted they install. Jason burst through the door, his face flushed with anger. You want to explain what the hell you think you're doing? You need to leave, Amelia said calmly, her hand steady on her camera. This is private property. Private property? I paid for this. His voice rose, echoing in the small space. Everything you have, I gave you. And this is how you repay me? With lies and accusations. The only lies are yours, Jason. And I have proof of every single one. Something flickered in his eyes, uncertainty, maybe fear, but it was quickly buried under renewed anger. You're making a huge mistake. That prenup is ironclad. You'll walk away with nothing, and you'll deserve it. The security company arrived before she had to respond. 2 officers in uniform escorted Jason out while he shouted threats about lawyers and consequences. Amelia watched him go, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. He'd finally shown his true face in public. The security cameras had captured everything. The flowers arrived that afternoon, an enormous arrangement of roses and lilies with a card that read, I'm sorry. Let's talk. We can fix this. J. Amelia photographed the arrangement for evidence, then called a women's shelter and arranged for the flowers to be picked up and donated. She imagined them brightening someone's difficult day, and felt the gesture was more useful than anything Jason had ever given her. His next strategy was more calculated. He called Grace. "Amelia," Jason reached out. Grace said when they spoke that evening. "He wants me to mediate. Says you're not thinking clearly, that you've been manipulated by your lawyers." "What did you tell him?" "That he's delusional if he thinks I'd help him manipulate you further." Grace's voice was firm. "He tried the whole family first speech. I told him family doesn't commit fraud and forge signatures. He hung up on me." Good. Let Jason realize his support system was crumbling. Rebecca's investigation had reached a critical point. She'd traced Jason's embezzlement systematically. Shell accounts, falsified expense reports, money laundered through fake vendors. The total was staggering, approximately $800,000 over 3 years. "The pattern is sophisticated," Rebecca explained during an emergency meeting at Catherine's office. "He created multiple layers of deception. But he made mistakes, including forging Amelia's signature on some accounts, presumably to shift blame if caught." "Can they prosecute her?" Catherine's voice was sharp. "Not with this evidence. I can prove she had no access, no knowledge, no benefit from these accounts." "But," Rebecca hesitated, "his company needs to know. This is criminal activity." Catherine nodded slowly. "Anonymous tip to their fraud department?" "Through my contacts, yes. They'll investigate, and when they find what I found, they'll have no choice but to report it." The tip was made that afternoon. By Friday, Jason's company had launched a full internal investigation. Meanwhile, Amelia's photography was experiencing a resurgence she'd never imagined. Her Invisible series had struck a chord on social media. Thousands of shares, hundreds of comments from people who saw their own experiences reflected in her images of shadows and hidden truths. She'd expanded the series, creating new pieces that explored themes of distortion, deception, and the gap between public facades and private realities. Each photograph was technically brilliant but emotionally raw, showing the world through a lens that refused to look away from uncomfortable truths. A local gallery owner named Dominic Ashford reached out with a proposal that took her breath away. "I'd like to offer you a solo show," he said when they met at his gallery downtown. "Your work is extraordinary, both technically and emotionally. I think you're capturing something important about our cultural moment." Dominic was in his early 40s, with graying temples and an easy confidence that came from years in the art world. His gallery specialized in contemporary photography, and a show there could launch, or relaunch, a serious career. "The series resonates," he continued, gesturing to the prints she'd brought. "People are hungry for art that tells truth, especially about power dynamics and hidden abuse. You're not just documenting your experience, you're giving voice to thousands of others." Amelia felt tears threatening but held them back. This was what she'd dreamed of years ago, before Jason convinced her to set aside her ambitions. "Yes," she said. "I'd be honored." They shook hands, and Amelia felt another piece of her old self click back into place. The call from Vanessa came on a Sunday evening, from a number Amelia didn't recognize. "Please don't hang up," the voice said immediately. "It's Vanessa. From the cabin." Amelia's first instinct was to disconnect. But something in the woman's voice, panic, desperation, made her pause. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you. In person. Please. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm pregnant and Jason's ghosted me completely, and I don't know what to do." They met at a neutral location, a coffee shop across town where neither of them would run into anyone they knew. Vanessa looked younger than Amelia had realized, maybe 28 or 29, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "I didn't know," Vanessa said immediately. "About you. I mean, I knew he was married, but he told me you were separated. That the divorce was already in progress. That you were just waiting for paperwork. And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him." Vanessa's voice cracked. "He was charming. Attentive. Everything seemed perfect until his company started investigating him for fraud. Then he just disappeared. Won't answer my calls. Changed his number. I'm 4 months pregnant, and he's acting like I don't exist." Amelia should have felt satisfaction watching the other woman's distress. Instead, she felt a strange kinship. 2 women betrayed by the same man, both disposable in his calculations. "What did he tell you about me?" Amelia asked. "That you were mentally unstable. that you controlled all his money and wouldn't let him leave, that his lawyers were working to protect him from you taking everything in the divorce. Vanessa laughed bitterly. I'm guessing none of that was true? He controlled everything. The money, the house, my career. He's been systematically hiding assets and forging my signature on documents. And now I'm learning he's been embezzling from his company. Vanessa went pale. He told me he was getting a huge promotion, that once his bonus came through, we'd be set for life. There is no promotion. There's a criminal investigation. They sat in silence for a moment, two women processing the magnitude of Jason's deception. I'm filing for child support, Vanessa finally said. My lawyer says I have rights, even if he's facing criminal charges. The baby didn't do anything wrong. No, Amelia agreed. She didn't. It was strange, sitting across from the woman who'd been in Jason's arms at the cabin. But Vanessa wasn't the enemy. She was another victim, another woman who'd trusted Jason's lies. For what it's worth, Vanessa said as they stood to leave, I'm sorry. I should have questioned more, looked deeper. I just wanted the fairy tale to be real. So did I, Amelia said quietly. For 8 years, so did I. Jason's carefully constructed world collapsed with stunning speed. His company pressed criminal charges after their investigation confirmed Rebecca's findings: embezzlement, fraud, money laundering. The local business press covered the story with salacious detail. Respected financial analyst arrested for stealing $800,000 from employer. The divorce proceedings revealed his hidden assets, his forged documents, his systematic financial abuse. Catherine ensured every detail became part of the public record. Vanessa's paternity suit added another layer, confirming not just infidelity, but ongoing deception and now abandoned promises. Within 2 weeks, Jason's reputation, the polished professional image he'd cultivated so carefully, lay in ruins. His lawyer called Catherine repeatedly, trying to negotiate, but they had nothing to negotiate with. The evidence was overwhelming. The prenup was invalid due to fraud. Jason faced both civil and criminal consequences. Amelia watched it unfold from the safety of her studio, surrounded by her photographs and her reclaimed dreams. She felt no satisfaction in his destruction, but she felt no pity either. He'd built his life on lies. Now those lies had been exposed to harsh light, and everything was crumbling. Justice, she was learning, didn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it just felt necessary. And sometimes the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was simply living well, creating art, and refusing to remain invisible any longer. Jason's professional life collapsed with the swift brutality reserved for those who've been caught stealing from powerful people. His employer, Whitmore Financial Group, terminated him immediately after completing their internal investigation. The press release was carefully worded but damning. Following discovery of significant financial irregularities, Whitmore Financial has terminated senior analyst Jason Pratt and is cooperating fully with law enforcement. The criminal charges followed within 48 hours: embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and money laundering. Each count carried potential prison time. Each count was meticulously documented. The prosecution built their case with devastating precision. They called colleagues who testified about Jason's suspicious behavior, the unexplained bonuses he'd claimed, the expense reports that never quite added up, the way he'd always volunteered to handle certain client accounts personally. He was territorial about his files. One coworker testified during a preliminary hearing. If anyone asked to review his work, he'd get defensive. Said we didn't understand his methods. Another colleague described how Jason had falsified reports, claiming business expenses that investigators later proved were personal purchases. Furniture for the downtown condo, jewelry for multiple women, payments toward investments held solely in his name. The $800,000 he'd stolen over 3 years had funded his double life in meticulous detail. Investigators traced every dollar. Monthly payments on the affair apartment, weekend getaways with Vanessa and others, expensive gifts meant to maintain his image as a successful, generous partner. None of it was real. All of it was purchased with stolen money. But the most damning discovery was his attempt to frame Amelia. Forensic document analysts confirmed what Rebecca had suspected. Jason had forged Amelia's signature on multiple accounts and transfers. If caught, he'd planned to claim she was the mastermind, The controlling wife who'd forced him into illegal schemes, who'd threatened him, who'd orchestrated everything while appearing innocent. The plan had a cruel elegance. He'd spent years making Amelia financially dependent, systematically controlling her access to information, then positioned her to take the fall if his schemes unraveled. Catherine and Rebecca worked tirelessly to dismantle this narrative before it could gain traction. "Look at the access logs," Rebecca presented during a meeting with prosecutors. Amelia had no login credentials for these accounts. No passwords, no security questions in her name. Jason created these accounts using her forged signature, but she was never granted actual access. Catherine provided documentation of Jason's financial abuse, how he'd controlled all household money, made Amelia ask permission for purchases, discouraged her from working. A woman with no financial independence doesn't mastermind an embezzlement scheme. She's a victim of the man who did. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution dropped any consideration of charging Amelia, instead viewing her forged signatures as additional counts of fraud against Jason. But the experience left her shaken. For weeks, she'd lived with the possibility that Jason's final act of control might be implicating her in his crimes. The relief when that threat dissolved was so intense it left her trembling. "He tried to destroy you completely," Grace said when they met for coffee. "Not just leave you, actually destroy you." Amelia thought about the woman she'd been 8 years ago, full of artistic ambition and confidence. Jason hadn't just wanted to leave that woman. He'd wanted to erase her entirely. But she was still here, and she was building something he couldn't touch. Dominic's offer of a solo show became Amelia's lifeline during the darkest weeks of the criminal investigation. "I want to give you the main gallery for 6 weeks, he said during their planning meeting. "The timing works perfectly. We can open in early October, catch the fall art season." 6 weeks in Dominic's prestigious space. It was the kind of opportunity that launched careers, that transformed photographers from promising to established. Amelia threw herself into the work with obsessive focus. She expanded her Invisible series, creating new pieces that explored themes of financial abuse, hidden truths, and the negative space where women were forced to exist in controlling relationships. She photographed empty rooms with single objects that suggested missing presence. A chair pulled away from a table, a shadow where a person should be, reflections that showed spaces behind the viewer rather than the viewer themselves. The technical execution was flawless, but the emotional content was what made the work extraordinary. Each image asked the viewer to see what was absent, to notice who'd been erased, to recognize the architecture of control in seemingly ordinary spaces. Dana officially became her business manager, handling scheduling, client communications, and the growing administrative demands of a thriving photography practice. They formalized their partnership with contracts and profit-sharing agreements. Everything transparent and equal, the opposite of Amelia's marriage. "Your session bookings are completely full for the next 3 months, Dana reported one afternoon. "And we've had inquiries from 2 commercial clients about ongoing contracts." The business was growing faster than Amelia had imagined possible. Part of it was her talent, finally unleashed after years of suppression. Part of it was the viral attention from her social media series. And part of it was simply that she was creating work that mattered, that spoke to experiences many people recognized but few artists captured. Grace provided detailed character statements for the divorce proceedings, describing years of Jason's controlling behavior, his need to dominate, his inability to tolerate anyone else's success. "He was jealous of Amelia from the beginning," Grace wrote in her statement. "He couldn't handle that she was talented, that people noticed her. He systematically worked to diminish her confidence and isolate her from support systems. This wasn't a marriage, it was a slow-motion erasure." As the walls closed in, Jason became desperate. He called from different numbers, burner phones, friends' phones, numbers Amelia didn't recognize. She blocked each one after the first message, but not before hearing his escalating panic. The voicemails started with rage. "You've ruined my life. I hope you're satisfied." Then shifted to manipulation. "I love you. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. Please call me." Finally descended into self-pity. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The stress. I did everything for us." The emails were worse, long, rambling messages that blamed work stress, claimed he'd been trying to protect her, insisted his crimes were mistakes rather than calculated deceptions. He promised to change, to get therapy, to be the husband she deserved. "I know I hurt you," one email read, "but destroying me won't heal you. We can start over. Go to counseling. Build something better. Please, Amelia. Don't let the lawyers turn this into something it doesn't have to be." She forwarded every message to Catherine without responding. "He's trying to manipulate you," Catherine said. "Creating a narrative where he's the victim, where you're being vindictive. Don't engage. Let him spiral." Jason's mother, Patricia, called requesting a meeting. They met at a restaurant, and Patricia looked older than Amelia remembered, worn down by her son's crimes and the public humiliation. "I need you to understand," Patricia began. "Jason is still my son. I love him, even though what he's done is unforgivable." "I understand," Amelia said carefully. "But I didn't come here to ask you to drop the charges or forgive him." Patricia's voice firmed. "I came to apologize. For not seeing who he really was. For not protecting you better. You were always kind to me, and he never deserved you." It was more than Amelia had expected. "Thank you. He's asking me to talk to you. To convince you to settle quietly, to not press the criminal charges." Patricia met her eyes. "I told him no. He needs to face consequences. Maybe it's the only way he'll ever change." After Patricia left, Amelia sat in her car processing the conversation. Even Jason's own mother recognized what he was. The opening night of Invisible No More arrived with the crispness of early October, golden light slanting through Dominic's gallery windows. Amelia had worked 16-hour days for weeks, finalizing prints, selecting frames, crafting the exhibition layout. Each piece was positioned deliberately, creating a journey through erasure, recognition, and reclamation. The gallery filled with press, critics, collectors, and supporters. Dana managed the crowd expertly while Amelia stood among her work, feeling simultaneously exposed and powerful. People moved through the exhibition in unusual silence, pausing before each piece, reading the small cards that provided context without over-explaining. Amelia watched their faces, the recognition, the discomfort, the moments of profound connection. An art critic from the city's major newspaper stood before a photograph titled "Negative Space." An empty chair at a dinner table, the shadow suggesting someone had just stood and walked away, leaving only absence. "Extraordinary," the critic murmured, making notes. Dominic moved through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing Amelia to collectors and critics, facilitating conversations that might lead to sales or future opportunities. But when he looked at Amelia, there was something beyond professional interest in his expression. Genuine admiration, perhaps even wonder. "You've created something remarkable," he said during a quiet moment. "This isn't just photography. It's testimony. It's art that refuses to let anyone look away." Grace arrived with a group of her friends, all of them viewing the exhibition with fierce attention. Vanessa came too, unexpectedly, standing before a photograph titled "The Frame," for nearly 10 minutes before approaching Amelia. "Thank you," Vanessa said quietly, "for seeing us. All of us who were made invisible." By the time the opening ended, Amelia had sold 12 pieces and received commissions for 3 more. Critics were already posting reviews online, words like powerful, unflinching, and essential appearing in early responses. But more important than sales or reviews was the feeling coursing through Amelia as she stood in the gallery surrounded by her work, her supporters, her reclaimed life. She was visible, not as Jason's wife, not as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as Amelia Brooks, artist, photographer, survivor, woman who'd refused to remain erased. She caught her reflection in the gallery window, backlit by the warm interior light, her silhouette strong and clear. For the first time in years, she recognized herself completely. The trial of Jason Michael Pratt began on a cold Monday morning in November, the courthouse steps crowded with reporters and cameras. What had started as a private betrayal had become public spectacle, the kind of cautionary tale that local news covered with salacious detail. Financial analyst accused of stealing $800,000 to fund Secret Life. Wife claims financial abuse while husband embezzled from employer. Multiple women testify in white-collar crime case. Amelia sat in the courtroom gallery beside Dana, watching the proceedings with the same focused attention she brought to framing a photograph. Every detail mattered. Every moment was part of a larger composition that would determine Jason's fate and finalize her freedom. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented financial records that tracked every stolen dollar, from Jason's employer's accounts to shell companies he'd created, to personal investments, to payments for the downtown condo and gifts for multiple women. The paper trail was intricate, but forensic accountants walked the jury through it step by step, showing the systematic nature of his theft. This wasn't opportunistic crime, the lead prosecutor explained. Mr. Pratt created an elaborate system of deception over 3 years, falsifying expense reports, forging signatures, and laundering money through fake vendors. He didn't steal out of desperation. He stole to fund a lifestyle his legitimate salary couldn't support. Jason sat at the defense table in an expensive suit that couldn't hide how much weight he'd lost, his lawyer beside him taking constant notes. He kept his expression neutral, but Amelia could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the edge of the table. Co-workers testified about his suspicious behavior. The territorial nature around certain files, the expense reports that never quite made sense, the way he'd manipulated accounting systems to hide his tracks. He was always charming, one colleague said. Always had explanations that sounded reasonable. But looking back, there were red flags everywhere. The company's CFO, a stern woman in her 60s, detailed the systematic theft with barely contained anger. Mr. Pratt betrayed the trust of his employer, his colleagues, and our clients. He used his position to steal funds that were meant to be invested responsibly. The damage to our reputation has been substantial. Then Vanessa took the stand. She was visibly pregnant now, nearly 7 months, and her testimony was delivered with quiet devastation. She described how Jason had presented himself as a successful executive with a separated wife, how he'd promised a future together, how he'd spent lavishly on gifts and trips, all funded with stolen money. He told me his wife was mentally unstable and controlling, Vanessa said, her voice steady despite the emotional weight. That she wouldn't sign divorce papers, that she was threatening to take everything. He positioned himself as a victim trapped in an abusive marriage. And you believed him? The prosecutor asked. I wanted to believe him. He was convincing. Charming. Vanessa looked directly at Jason. It was only after the investigation started that I learned the truth. That he'd been lying to everyone, stealing from his employer, manipulating multiple women simultaneously. Jason wouldn't meet her eyes. Grace testified next, and her testimony cut deeper than any financial record could. My brother has always needed to control everything around him, she said from the witness stand. He can't tolerate anyone else succeeding, anyone else getting attention. When we were children, he'd sabotage my school projects if I was getting better grades. As adults, he couldn't handle that his wife was a talented photographer gaining recognition. The prosecutor guided her through specifics. Grace described Jason's systematic isolation of Amelia, his dismissal of her career, his financial control disguised as protection. He didn't just want a wife, Grace concluded. He wanted someone who existed only to support him, who had no independent identity. When Amelia started to push back, even slightly, he began planning his exit, making sure she'd be left with nothing. The defense's strategy became clear during cross-examination. Implicate Amelia. Jason's lawyer suggested that Amelia had known about the embezzlement, that she'd benefited from it, that her signatures on certain documents proved complicity. The theory was desperate but potentially effective. Shift blame to the wronged wife, paint her as the real mastermind. Catherine demolished it in less than an hour. She presented Rebecca's forensic analysis, showing Amelia had no access to the accounts in question, no passwords, no login history. The signatures bearing Amelia's name were proven forgeries through expert document analysis. Banking records showed Jason had systematically controlled all household finances, giving Amelia minimal access while building his hidden empire. Mrs. Pratt wasn't a co-conspirator, Catherine stated clearly. She was another victim of Mr. Pratt's systematic deception and control. Then Amelia took the stand. She'd prepared for this moment for weeks, rehearsing with Catherine, reviewing the facts, steeling herself to face Jason across a courtroom while describing their marriage under oath. The prosecutor began gently, establishing timeline and context, then moved to the harder questions. Mrs. Pratt, can you describe your husband's control over your finances? Amelia took a breath and began. Jason managed everything. All bank accounts were in his name or joint accounts he controlled. I had to ask permission for purchases over $50. He convinced me this was normal, that he was protecting our financial future. Did you have independent income? Not after we married. I'd been building a photography career, but Jason encouraged me to stop taking clients. He said his work was demanding, and he needed a wife who could support him fully. I trusted him. When did you first become aware of his embezzlement? During the divorce investigation. My forensic accountant discovered hidden accounts and suspicious transfers. That's when we learned he'd been stealing from his employer for 3 years. The prosecutor let that sink in, then continued. Did you benefit from this stolen money? No. Jason kept me on a tight budget while using stolen funds for affair apartments, gifts for other women, and personal investments in his name only. I was living on an allowance while he was stealing hundreds of thousands. Jason's lawyer tried to shake her testimony during cross-examination, suggesting she must have known, must have suspected. Amelia remained calm and factual, describing her isolation, her financial dependence, Jason's systematic control. But the most powerful moment came during her victim impact statement. The judge allowed her to speak directly about how Jason's crimes had affected her life. Amelia stood at the witness stand, looked at the jury, and spoke from a place of hard-won clarity. Jason didn't just steal money from his employer, she began. He stole years of my life. He systematically dismantled my career, isolated me from friends, made me financially dependent, and then planned to leave me with nothing while framing me for his crimes. I was an award-winning photographer before our marriage. I had gallery showings, commercial contracts, a promising career. Jason convinced me to give it all up, claiming it was for our family's good. Then he spent 8 years dismissing my talent, discouraging my dreams, making me believe I wasn't capable of success. While I made myself smaller to support him, he was stealing from his employer, lying to multiple women, and building a hidden life funded by crime. When I discovered the truth, he tried to frame me, forge my signature on documents so if caught, he could claim I was the mastermind. This wasn't just financial crime. It was systematic abuse. It was the attempted erasure of another person's identity, talent, and future. Her voice remained steady, but the emotion behind her words was undeniable. Several jurors were visibly moved. I've had to rebuild everything, my career, my confidence, my sense of self. I'm doing it successfully, but I'll never get back those 8 years. I'll never know who I might have become if I'd never met Jason Pratt. She sat down to absolute silence in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Amelia tried to work, to focus on upcoming photography sessions, but found herself checking her phone constantly for updates from Catherine. The waiting was excruciating, not because she doubted the outcome, but because she needed this final piece of closure. The verdict came back on a Friday afternoon, guilty on all counts. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery, money laundering. The jury had seen through every defense strategy, every attempt at misdirection. Jason showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but Amelia watched him grip the table until his knuckles went white. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed for sentencing day. Victims of Jason's financial crimes filled the gallery. Co-workers whose retirement funds had been jeopardized, clients whose trust had been betrayed, the company's executives seeking justice. The judge, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and no patience for manipulation, reviewed the case thoroughly before pronouncing sentence. Mr. Pratt, you held a position of trust and used it to steal systematically over 3 years. You showed no remorse until caught, attempted to frame your wife for your crimes, and manipulated multiple women with elaborate lies. Your actions were calculated, deliberate, and caused extensive harm. She sentenced him to 6 years in federal prison with full restitution to his employer and fraud victims. Additionally, the judge continued, you will have no contact with your ex-wife following finalization of your divorce proceedings. The financial abuse you perpetrated was as serious as your embezzlement. Jason was led away by federal marshals, his expensive suit and polished appearance finally unable to mask what he truly was, a criminal facing consequences. Amelia watched him go and felt only closure. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just the quiet peace of a chapter definitively ended. In an adjacent courtroom that same afternoon, her divorce was finalized. The settlement was substantial, $290,000 representing half of their legitimate assets, the house refinanced in her name alone, and Jason's prized vintage car collection, which she sold within a week to fund expanded studio space. Catherine had fought for every dollar, and the prenup Jason had pressured Amelia into signing was ruled invalid due to fraud and coercion. Without his hidden assets to fight over, the divorce proceeded quickly. Amelia signed the final papers with her maiden name, Amelia Brooks. She walked out of the courthouse into bright December sunshine. Dominic was waiting by his car, having taken the afternoon off to be there for her. He'd become a steady presence over the past months, supportive but not intrusive, celebrating her successes without claiming credit for them. "How do you feel?" he asked. Amelia took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs, feeling the weight of 8 years finally lift from her shoulders. "Free," she said. "Completely, finally free." They drove to her studio, where Dana had champagne waiting and a new commission contract that would fund their operations for the next 6 months. That evening, Amelia stood in her studio surrounded by her photography equipment, her growing business, her reclaimed identity. Through the windows, the city lights sparkled in the darkness. Jason was in prison. Her divorce was final. Her career was thriving. And most importantly, she was visible, to herself, to the world, to everyone who'd once looked past her to see only Jason's wife. She raised her glass to her reflection in the dark window. "To new beginnings," she whispered, and meant it completely. 8 months after Jason's sentencing, Amelia stood in her expanded studio space, natural light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and barely recognized the life she'd built. The transformation had been gradual but profound, like watching a photograph develop in a darkroom, details emerging slowly until suddenly the full image becomes clear and undeniable. Invisible No More had received critical acclaim that exceeded even Dominic's optimistic predictions. The city's major newspaper ran a full-page review praising her unflinching examination of hidden power dynamics and technically brilliant compositions that reveal emotional truths. Art magazines from 3 different states requested features. A gallery in Boston inquired about bringing the exhibition there. The recognition translated into tangible success. She'd been commissioned for editorial work by 2 national magazines, landed commercial contracts with 3 local businesses, and was preparing a second solo show for spring. Her appointment calendar was booked solid for 3 months out. The original studio space, the modest single room where she'd rebuilt her career, had become too small. She'd moved to a converted warehouse in the Arts District, with separate areas for shooting, editing, client meetings, and Dana's growing administrative operation. Dana managed the business side with the same fierce competence she brought to everything. She'd created systems for client intake, project management, invoicing, and marketing that allowed Amelia to focus on the creative work she loved. They'd formalized their partnership with proper contracts and profit sharing, building something sustainable and equitable. "We're averaging 15 bookings per month now," Dana reported during their weekly business meeting. "And I've had to start a waiting list for new clients. You're officially in demand." Amelia looked around the studio, at the equipment she'd reclaimed and expanded, at the framed prints on the walls, at the evidence of creative work happening in every corner, and felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with anyone else's validation. This was hers, built with her talent, her vision, her hard work. She'd begun reconnecting with people from her old life, the one before Jason. There was Maya from art school, who'd gone on to become a successful commercial photographer. They met for coffee, and Maya admitted she'd tried to reach out several times during Amelia's marriage, but Jason had always intercepted, claiming Amelia was too busy. "I should have pushed harder," Maya said. "I knew something was off." "He was good at isolating me," Amelia replied, "making it seem natural, like we were just busy. It's not your fault." They began meeting regularly, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes for photography walks through the city where they'd critique each other's work and brainstorm projects. There was James Chun, a gallery owner who'd shown Amelia's work in her early 20s. He'd been disappointed when she disappeared from the art world, but welcomed her return with enthusiasm. "Your new work is even stronger than before," he said, reviewing her portfolio. "There's a depth now. You've lived through something and it shows in every frame." Through these reconnections, Amelia realized how much Jason had stolen beyond just years and money. He'd stolen her creative community, her support network, the professional relationships that could have helped her career flourish. But she was reclaiming them now, one conversation at a time. In April, she traveled to New York for a major photography conference. Walking into the convention center, surrounded by thousands of photographers from around the world, Amelia felt simultaneously intimidated and exhilarated. This was the creative community she'd longed for. People who understood the obsessive attention to light and composition, who spoke the language of aperture and shutter speed, who saw the world through frames. She attended panels on documentary photography, portrait techniques, and building sustainable creative businesses. She met photographers whose work she'd admired for years. She exchanged business cards and Instagram handles with artists from a dozen different countries. During a portfolio review session, a renowned photographer looked through Amelia's work with increasing interest. "Your Invisible series is extraordinary," he said. "Have you considered submitting to the National Photography Awards? This is exactly the kind of socially conscious work they're looking for." The suggestion planted a seed. Maybe she could compete at that level. Maybe she already was. On the flight home, Amelia drafted an application for the awards and made notes for her next series. The creative momentum was building, and she was finally in a position to ride it wherever it led. Her relationship with Dominic had developed cautiously over the months since the trial. At first, they were simply professional colleagues, gallery owner and artist discussing exhibitions and sales. Then came coffee meetings that lasted longer than necessary, conversations that drifted from art to personal history to dreams for the future. Dominic had been through his own difficult divorce 5 years earlier, which made him attuned to Amelia's need for space and patience. He never pushed, never assumed, never made her feel like she owed him anything for his support. Their first date was intentionally low-key, a walk through a sculpture park, discussing the installations, taking photos on their phones. "I like this," Amelia said as they stood before a piece exploring negative space. "No pressure, no expectations. Just enjoying each other's company." "That's all I want," Dominic replied. "Whatever pace feels right to you." The relationship deepened naturally over months of gallery openings, photography walks, dinners at quiet restaurants, and long conversations about art and life and healing from betrayal. Dominic treated her as an equal, celebrated her successes without claiming credit, encouraged her boldest creative risks, gave her space when she needed it. He was secure enough in himself that her achievements didn't threaten him. It was such a stark contrast to Jason that sometimes Amelia had to remind herself this was normal, this was healthy, this was what partnership should look like. When she told him about a major commission she'd landed independently, his response was immediate enthusiasm. "That's incredible. Tell me everything." No jealousy, no diminishment, no need to make it about himself. Just genuine happiness for her success. Her next major project emerged from conversations with Grace about domestic violence and financial abuse. "So many women don't recognize it as abuse," Grace said during one of their regular coffee meetings. "They think abuse has to be physical. They don't realize financial control is just as damaging." The observation sparked something in Amelia. She began photographing women who were rebuilding their lives after various forms of trauma: domestic violence, financial abuse, divorce, loss. The series was called Reconstruction, and it captured both the difficulty of the rebuilding process and the strength required to undertake it. Unlike the raw pain of Invisible No More, these images celebrated resilience. They showed women in the act of creating new lives, starting businesses, pursuing education, reclaiming hobbies they'd abandoned, simply existing in spaces where they felt safe and seen. Amelia donated all proceeds from print sales to domestic violence organizations and financial literacy programs for women leaving abusive relationships. The series became both art and activism, using her platform to help others in situations she understood intimately. Grace remained a steady presence in her life, though their relationship was complicated by Jason's continued existence in both their histories. "I'm sorry," Grace said repeatedly. "I'm sorry he's my brother. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I'm sorry you had to go through that. You're not responsible for him, Amelia reminded her. You've been nothing but supportive. That's what matters. They'd formed their own relationship now, separate from Jason. Two women who'd both been affected by his narcissism and control in different ways, finding solidarity in shared understanding. Vanessa gave birth to a daughter in late spring, a healthy girl she named Sophie. She sent Amelia a brief text with a photo. She's here. She's perfect. Thank you for testifying. It helped me get full custody. They'd maintained cordial but distant contact since the trial. Amelia felt no animosity toward Vanessa anymore. Just a kind of sad kinship with another woman who'd believed Jason's lies and paid the price. They weren't friends, exactly, but they understood each other in a way few others could. Both had been manipulated by the same man. Both had been positioned as disposable in his calculations. Both had survived and built new lives from the wreckage. Amelia sent a small gift for Sophie, a soft blanket and a card that read, "Congratulations. Wishing you both every happiness." It felt right to acknowledge the baby's innocence in all this. Sophie hadn't chosen her father, but she deserved a good life anyway. The letter from Jason arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded through his lawyer per the no-contact order. Amelia stared at the envelope for several minutes before opening it. She'd known this moment would come eventually. Jason wouldn't be able to resist reaching out, trying to manipulate one more time. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten, alternating between apology and self-justification. I've had a lot of time to think here. I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. The pressure of my job, the expectations, the stress, it all got away from me. I never meant for things to end like this. I see now how I controlled you. How I discouraged your photography. I was jealous, I think. You were so talented and I couldn't handle that. Prison is hard. I'm in therapy now, working on myself. I hope someday you can forgive me. Do you ever think about the good times? Those first years when we were happy? That was real, Amelia. What we had was real before everything fell apart. Half apology, half self-pity, with a thread of manipulation running through it all. He took partial responsibility while blaming stress and circumstances. He acknowledged some wrongs while trying to rewrite history, suggesting their early years had been genuinely happy when Amelia now recognized the control had been there from the beginning, just more subtly disguised. She read the letter once, felt nothing but faint annoyance at the manipulation, and filed it away in a folder marked Legal Jason. She didn't respond. Wouldn't respond. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had no interest in reopening it for his emotional comfort. She returned to her desk where photos from her latest session waited for editing. A portrait series of a woman entrepreneur launching her first business after leaving an abusive marriage. Real work. Meaningful work. Her work. Jason was in prison, dealing with consequences of his own making. And she was here, in her studio, surrounded by light and creative possibility, building a life he'd tried to prevent but couldn't stop. She adjusted the color balance on a particularly striking image and smiled. Some things, once brought into focus, could never be blurred again. And she was finally, completely, sharply in focus, seeing herself clearly for the first time in years and liking what she saw. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning in September, nearly 18 months after Jason's conviction. Amelia was editing photos from a commercial shoot when Dana burst into the studio, phone in hand, barely containing her excitement. "You won," Dana said breathlessly. "The Hartwell Foundation Emerging Artist Award. You won." Amelia stared at her, not quite processing. "What?" "Check your email. They sent the official notification an hour ago." Amelia opened her laptop with trembling hands. There it was, an email from the Hartwell Foundation, one of the most prestigious photography organizations in the country. She'd submitted her reconstruction series months ago, not actually expecting anything. "Dear Ms. Brooks, we are delighted to inform you that you have been selected as this year's recipient of the Hartwell Foundation Emerging Artist Award. The prize included a solo exhibition at a major New York gallery, a $50,000 grant to support her artistic practice, and inclusion in the Foundation's permanent collection." Amelia read it 3 times before the reality sank in. This was the kind of recognition that transformed careers, that opened doors to opportunities she'd barely dared imagine. "I need to call Dominic," she said, still in shock. His response was pure joy, no jealousy, no need to diminish the achievement, just genuine celebration of her success. "This is incredible. I'm so proud of you. We need to celebrate properly." That evening, surrounded by friends in the studio she'd built from nothing, drinking champagne and eating takeout, Amelia felt the full weight of how far she'd come. 2 years ago, she'd been a wife who'd abandoned her dreams. Now she was an award-winning photographer with national recognition. Grace arrived with flowers. Maya brought a vintage camera as a joke gift. Even Vanessa sent a congratulatory text with a photo of baby Sophie wearing a tiny future photographer onesie. "You deserve this," Dana said quietly during a moment alone. "Everything you've built, it's not luck. It's talent and hard work and refusing to stay invisible." The $50,000 grant allowed Amelia to expand her vision dramatically. Her work evolved beyond documenting trauma into celebrating resilience and joy. She began a new series photographing survivors of various hardships, not in their moments of pain, but in their moments of reclamation. Women opening businesses, single mothers graduating college, domestic violence survivors buying their first homes, people who'd rebuilt after losing everything. The images captured strength without erasing struggle. They showed beauty without minimizing hardship. Each photograph was a testament to human resilience, to the capacity for transformation, to the possibility of happiness after devastation. She called the series Aperture, widening perspectives, playing on both the photographic term and the metaphor of expanding how we see survivors, not as victims frozen in trauma, but as whole people building futures. The technical execution was as brilliant as ever, but the emotional content had shifted. There was still weight and depth, but also light. Hope. The suggestion that healing was possible and life continued after betrayal. Critics noticed the evolution. One review described her new work as a mature artist moving beyond documentation of pain into celebration of survival, without losing the unflinching honesty that made her initial work so powerful. Her relationship with Dominic had reached a natural turning point. They'd been dating for over a year, and the question of living together had been circling their conversations for months. Both wanted to take that step, but both were cautious, aware that moving too fast could damage what they'd carefully built. Then Dominic found the loft. It was in a renovated warehouse 2 blocks from his gallery, an open-plan space with exposed brick, industrial windows, and enough square footage to serve as both living quarters and working studio. The first floor could be converted into Amelia's photography space, with living areas upstairs. "Come look at it," Dominic said. "No pressure. Just see if it speaks to you." The moment Amelia walked in, she knew. The light was perfect, northern exposure for consistent natural lighting. The space was large enough for multiple shooting areas. And upstairs, the living space felt warm despite the industrial aesthetic, with room for a proper home that reflected both their tastes. "We could make this work," she said cautiously. "If we're both ready." "I'm ready if you are." They bought it together, both names on the deed, everything transparent and equal. The renovation took 3 months, building walls for privacy, installing proper lighting systems, creating a functional kitchen upstairs, ensuring the studio space met all Amelia's professional needs. Moving in together felt different than it had with Jason. There was no sense of losing herself, no need to make her life smaller to accommodate someone else's ego. Dominic celebrated her success, supported her work, and maintained his own thriving gallery business. They were 2 whole people choosing to build a life together, not one person absorbing another. Dana's role in the business had grown exponentially over the past year. She managed not just scheduling and client relations, but marketing strategy, financial planning, and business development. She'd turned down 3 corporate job offers to stay with Amelia's growing company, believing in what they were building together. It was time to make it official. "I want you to be an equal partner," Amelia said during a meeting at their favorite coffee shop. "Not just business manager, actual partner. 50-50 ownership, equal decision-making power, profit sharing, everything." Dana looked stunned. "Amelia, this is your company. Your talent built this. My talent creates the art. Your talent built the business around it. We're equally essential. And I trust you completely." Amelia slid a folder across the table. "I had Catherine draw up partnership papers. Take them home, read them, get your own lawyer to review them. But I want this to be official. Dana's eyes welled up. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. They formalized the partnership that month, restructuring as Brooks and Mitchell Photography. The equity split reflected their equal importance to the company's success, and both of them felt the rightness of the decision. To partnerships built on trust, Dana said, raising her coffee cup. To building something that lasts, Amelia replied. The unexpected visit from Vanessa came on a gray October afternoon. Amelia was between sessions when the studio door opened and Vanessa walked in carrying baby Sophie, now 6 months old, with bright eyes and Jason's dark hair. I should have called first, Vanessa said nervously. But I wanted to thank you in person. My lawyer said your testimony was crucial for getting full custody. They'd had minimal contact since the trial, a few texts, brief updates, cordial but distant. Now, standing in the studio with Vanessa holding the baby, Amelia felt the strangeness of their connection. Come in, Amelia said. I'll make coffee. They sat in the studio's small office area, Sophie gurgling happily in Vanessa's arms, while two women who'd been destroyed by the same man tried to figure out what, if anything, they were to each other. Jason signed away parental rights, Vanessa explained. His lawyer advised it, said with his criminal record, fighting custody would be pointless. Sophie gets support from his restitution payments, but otherwise, he's not in our lives. That's probably best, Amelia said carefully. I think so too. Vanessa looked down at her daughter. I've been in therapy, working through everything, trying to understand how I didn't see the manipulation, the lies. He was good at lying, Amelia said. We both believed him because we wanted to believe him. Do you hate me? The question was quiet, vulnerable. Amelia considered it honestly. No. I did at first, when I discovered you at the cabin. But you were lied to as much as I was. We were both victims of the same narcissist. I'm sorry anyway, for my part in your pain. They sat with that for a moment, two women acknowledging shared history without the weight of blame or bitterness. Then Sophie started fussing, and Vanessa stood to leave. Thank you for testifying, Vanessa said at the door. And congratulations on your award. I saw the article. You're doing amazing things. After she left, Amelia returned to editing photos, struck by the strange paths life took. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined having a civil conversation with Jason's mistress. Now it felt like closing another door, acknowledging the past without letting it control the present. Jason's parole hearing was denied in November. Grace texted her the news. Parole board said no. He'll serve at least 5 years total. Thought you should know. Amelia read it, felt absolutely nothing, and went back to preparing for her New York exhibition. Jason was irrelevant to her life now. Whether he served 5 years or 15, whether he got therapy or remained unchanged, whether he ever understood what he'd done, none of it affected her anymore. She'd built a life so full and meaningful that he'd become nothing more than a cautionary tale, a chapter she occasionally referenced but never reread. She made one final symbolic gesture that month. Her wedding and engagement rings had sat in a drawer since the divorce, expensive jewelry with painful associations. She could have kept them, could have had the stones reset, but she didn't want any remnant of that marriage in her life. She sold the set to a jeweler for $8,000, then used the money to establish a photography scholarship through the Hartwell Foundation, specifically for women re-entering creative careers after financial abuse, divorce, or domestic violence. The Brooks Second Chances Scholarship, the foundation named it, and Amelia felt the rightness of transforming Jason's broken promises into opportunities for other women. Aperture, Widening Perspectives, opened at a prestigious New York gallery in early December. The exhibition was larger than Invisible No More. 40 images instead of 25, spanning 3 gallery rooms, showing the full evolution of her artistic vision from documentation of abuse to celebration of survival. The opening was attended by collectors, critics, and photographers from across the country. Sales were strong before the night ended. Reviews praised her technical mastery and emotional intelligence, her ability to capture both struggle and triumph without sentimentality. Standing in the gallery surrounded by her work, Dominic beside her, Dana managing the crowd expertly, Amelia felt a profound sense of arrival. Not arrival at some final destination. Her artistic journey would continue evolving, but arrival at authentic selfhood. She knew who she was now, Amelia Brooks, photographer, business owner, partner, friend, survivor who'd transformed trauma into art that helped others. A woman who'd been made invisible and had reclaimed every dimension of herself. A woman whose aperture had widened to capture not just pain, but possibility. She caught her reflection in the gallery window, confident, present, visible, and smiled at the image staring back. This was who she'd always been meant to become. And the best part, her story was still unfolding, new chapters waiting to be written, new images waiting to be captured. The lens was focused. The light was perfect. And she was finally, completely ready for whatever came next. 2 years after her divorce was finalized, Amelia stood backstage at the Women in Photography conference, adjusting her microphone and trying to calm the nervous energy that still accompanied public speaking. She was the keynote speaker for the closing session. 300 photographers from across the country waiting to hear her story. The conference organizers had titled her talk, Reclaiming the Frame, Creative Identity After Abuse, and Amelia had spent weeks crafting words that honored her journey without wallowing in victimhood. "You're going to be amazing," Dana whispered, squeezing her hand before stepping back into the wings. The introduction began. Amelia heard her accomplishments listed: the Hartwell Award, exhibitions in New York and Boston, publications in major photography magazines, and felt the surreal disconnect of hearing her own success quantified publicly. Then she walked onto the stage, facing an auditorium full of creative women, many of whom had their own stories of struggle and survival. 2.5 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, I drove to a lakeside cabin to surprise my husband. What I discovered there destroyed my marriage, but it saved my life. For the next 40 minutes, she told her story. Not every detail, but the essential arc. The talented young photographer who'd abandoned her career for marriage, the systematic financial abuse disguised as protection, the discovery of betrayal, the strategic rebuilding of both her legal case and her artistic practice. I want to be clear about something, she said as she approached the conclusion. I didn't reclaim my creative identity because of my ex-husband's betrayal. I reclaimed it despite his attempts to permanently destroy it. The abuse wasn't what made me strong. Surviving it revealed strength I'd always had but had learned to suppress. She paused, looking out at the faces watching her with rapt attention. If you're in a relationship where you're making yourself smaller, where your dreams are dismissed as hobbies, where someone else controls your finances or your time or your confidence, please know that your talent is real. Your worth is inherent, and you deserve partnership that celebrates you, not diminishes you. The standing ovation surprised her. Women approached afterward with tears in their eyes, sharing their own stories of abuse and recovery, thanking her for giving voice to experiences they'd thought were theirs alone. It was exhausting and exhilarating and deeply meaningful. This was part of her purpose now, not just creating art, but using her platform to help others recognize and escape the patterns she'd survived. Brooks and Mitchell Photography had grown beyond anything they'd imagined during those early rebuilding days. The business now employed 3 assistant photographers, talented artists who handled overflow bookings and specialized shoots while learning advanced techniques from Amelia. Dana managed a roster of regular clients, commercial contracts, and a waiting list that extended 6 months out. But Amelia's proudest achievement was the second location they'd opened specifically for workshops. The space in a converted community center offered photography classes for women in transition, divorcees rebuilding their lives, domestic violence survivors seeking new skills, career changers pursuing artistic dreams they'd deferred for decades. Classes were offered on a sliding scale, with scholarships funded by proceeds from Amelia's print sales and generous donations from supporters who believed in the mission. The workshops taught technical photography skills, but also business fundamentals, confidence building, and the practical aspects of turning creative passion into sustainable income. You're teaching them more than photography, one participant told Amelia after completing the 8-week program. You're teaching us that we can rebuild, that it's not too late, that our dreams still matter. That feedback meant more than any critical review ever could. Amelia mentored individual photographers too, particularly women of color who faced additional barriers in the predominantly white art world. She introduced them to gallery owners, shared technical knowledge, helped them build portfolios, and navigate the business side of creative work. "Someone should have done this for me," she told Dana when they discussed expanding the mentorship program. "I lost 10 years because I didn't have proper support. I want to help other women avoid that." Her third solo exhibition opened in April at a prestigious gallery in Chicago. The show featured work from her Aperture series alongside new pieces exploring themes of joy, partnership, and creative community. It was her most technically accomplished and emotionally mature work yet, showing an artist completely in control of her vision. Dominic attended the opening, proud and supportive as always. He'd flown in from a gallery conference in Los Angeles specifically to be there, understanding how important these milestones were to her. After the formal reception ended and most guests had departed, Dominic pulled Amelia into a quiet corner of the gallery where one of her photographs hung. An image titled Partnership, showing two silhouettes in balanced, equal composition. "I have something to ask you," he said, and Amelia's heart started racing even before he pulled out the small velvet box. "Amelia Brooks, you are the most talented, strong, authentic person I've ever known. You inspire me daily with your creativity, your resilience, your generosity. I don't want to complete you. You're already complete. But I'd like to build a life beside you, as equals, as partners." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. "Will you marry me?" Amelia looked at him. This man who'd celebrated her successes without claiming credit, who'd supported her healing without rushing her timeline, who'd never once asked her to be smaller or quieter or less ambitious. "Yes," she said, "but on certain terms." Dominic smiled, understanding immediately. "A prenup? A prenup. I need to protect what I've built. Not because I don't trust you, but because I need to trust myself to never be that vulnerable again." "That seems completely reasonable," he said, slipping the ring onto her finger. "Equal partnership, transparent finances, mutual respect for each other's businesses and boundaries. Catherine can draft whatever you need." They kissed surrounded by her artwork, sealing a commitment that felt entirely different from her first marriage. This wasn't about romantic fantasy or losing herself in someone else. This was two whole people choosing to share their already full lives. Amelia's work was appearing everywhere now. Major photography publications featured her images and interviewed her about technique and artistic vision. Museum curators reached out about acquiring pieces for permanent collections. Her work recognized not just as contemporary commentary, but as art with lasting cultural value. The Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco purchased 3 pieces from her Invisible No More series for their permanent collection. A museum in Chicago acquired 2 from Aperture. The Hartwell Foundation featured her work in their traveling exhibition, showcasing award recipients from the past decade. Each acquisition felt like validation. Not that she needed external validation anymore, but it was satisfying to see her art recognized by institutions that shaped cultural conversations. Grace had become one of Amelia's closest friends, their relationship having evolved far beyond the obligation of family connection. They met for coffee every few weeks, conversations ranging from photography and nursing to relationships and healing to Grace's own advocacy work against financial abuse. Grace had started volunteering with a domestic violence organization, using her experience with Jason's narcissism and her professional healthcare background to help other women recognize patterns of abuse. "I can't undo having him as a brother," Grace told Amelia during one coffee meeting. "But I can use that experience to help others. To be the person who says, yes, that is abuse when someone's questioning their reality." "You're doing important work," Amelia said. "We both are." Grace smiled. "You with your photography and workshops, me with advocacy. Both of us helping women become visible again." Jason himself was rarely discussed between them anymore. He'd become irrelevant to both their lives, a cautionary tale, a shared history, but not an active presence. Sometimes, in quiet moments, Amelia thought about the woman she'd been. The one who'd driven to that cabin with homemade stew and false hope, believing she could fix her marriage through effort and devotion. The one who'd abandoned her photography career without recognizing it as sacrifice. The one who'd made herself invisible to accommodate someone else's insecurity. That woman felt like someone from a previous lifetime, someone Amelia barely recognized now. She was grateful for that woman's survival, for the core of strength that had endured years of systematic diminishment. But she was profoundly relieved that woman no longer existed, that she'd been transformed through pain and strategic action into someone stronger, wiser, more completely herself. The transformation hadn't been about becoming someone new. It had been about excavating who she'd always been beneath the layers of Jason's control, finding the confident artist who'd existed before marriage and had been waiting, dormant but not destroyed, to re-emerge. The phone call came on a Wednesday in late spring. "Ms. Brooks, this is Jennifer Martinez from the National Women's Foundation. We're launching a campaign about women's empowerment. Stories of women who've overcome adversity to achieve extraordinary success. We'd like to commission you to photograph the entire series." The project was massive, traveling to 15 cities over 6 months, photographing 50 women with diverse stories of triumph, creating a cohesive visual narrative that would be used in print, digital, and outdoor advertising nationwide. It was the kind of commission that elevated careers to new levels, that positioned photographers as important cultural voices rather than just skilled technicians. "The fee is substantial," Jennifer continued, naming a figure that made Amelia's eyes widen. "And you'd have creative control over the visual direction. We chose you specifically because of how you capture strength and resilience without sentimentality." Amelia looked around her studio, at the equipment she'd reclaimed and expanded, at the framed images on the walls, at Dana working across the room, at the evidence of everything she'd built from ruins. "I'm interested," she said. "Send me the details." After hanging up, she stood at the window overlooking the city, watching afternoon light paint buildings in golden hues. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She wasn't even just succeeding. She was thriving spectacularly, building exactly the life and career she'd once dreamed of before being told those dreams didn't matter. And the best part? This was just the beginning. Her artistic vision was still evolving. Her business was still growing. Her platform for helping others was still expanding. The woman who'd been made invisible had become impossible to miss. Not through loudness or self-promotion, but through the undeniable quality of her work and the authenticity of her presence. She pulled out her phone and texted Dominic, "Just landed a major national campaign. Celebrating tonight?" His response was immediate, "Absolutely. So proud of you. Your success is extraordinary." Not our success. Not we did it. Her success. Acknowledged and celebrated without claiming any credit. That, Amelia thought, was what partnership should look like. And she was finally, completely, spectacularly ready for all of it. The success, the love, the continued growth, the adventures still waiting to be captured through her lens. The portrait of the artist was still being painted, new details emerging with each passing day. And she couldn't wait to see what came next. 3 years after discovering Jason's betrayal at the lakeside cabin, Amelia sat in the grand ballroom of a New York hotel, wearing a midnight blue dress that made her feel powerful and elegant, waiting for the final award of the evening to be announced. The National Photography Awards represented the pinnacle of recognition in her field, the kind of honor that validated entire careers, that transformed artists from respected to legendary. Her series, Reclaimed Light, had been nominated for Documentary Photography of the Year alongside work from photographers she'd admired for decades. She didn't expect to win. The competition was extraordinary. And the winner of Documentary Photography of the Year, the presenter announced, opening the envelope with practiced drama, is Amelia Brooks for Reclaimed Light. The ballroom erupted in applause. Dana grabbed her hand, squeezing hard. Dominic kissed her cheek, beaming with pride. Grace, who'd flown in specifically for the ceremony, was already crying. Amelia walked to the stage in a daze, accepting the Crystal Award, standing before a microphone with hundreds of industry professionals watching, and suddenly understood what she needed to say. 3 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I started over with more fear than confidence. My marriage had ended in betrayal. My career had been dormant for nearly a decade. I had to rebuild everything, my artistic practice, my business, my sense of self-worth. She paused, looking out at the audience filled with photographers, critics, and collectors. I didn't know if I still had talent. I didn't know if anyone would care about my work after such a long absence. But I had to try, because the alternative was remaining invisible forever, and I'd been invisible long enough. A few people in the audience nodded, understanding the weight behind those words. Reclaimed Light is a series about women rebuilding after trauma, after abuse, after loss, after systematic attempts to diminish them. But it's also a self-portrait. Every image in that series reflects my own journey from darkness into light, from silence into voice, from invisibility into presence. She held up the award, light catching the crystal. I want to thank some people who made this possible. Dana Mitchell, my business partner and closest friend, who believed in me when I barely believed in myself. Dominic Ashford, my fiancé, who celebrates my success without needing to diminish it. Grace Pratt, who chose solidarity over family loyalty when it mattered most. And every woman who trusted me to photograph their story. You gave me permission to tell my own. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. I dedicate this award to anyone who's been made to feel invisible. To anyone who's had their dreams dismissed as hobbies, their talent questioned, their ambitions treated as threats. To anyone who's been told they're not good enough, smart enough, talented enough to succeed on their own terms. She looked directly into the camera recording the ceremony, speaking to an audience beyond this ballroom. Your art matters. Your voice matters. Your presence matters. And anyone who tries to make you smaller is revealing their own inadequacy, not yours. The standing ovation started before she finished speaking and continued as she walked off stage, tears streaming down her face, holding the award that represented so much more than professional recognition. It represented reclamation, validation, the undeniable proof that she'd not only survived but thrived spectacularly. Later, reviewing the image on her camera's display, Amelia saw exactly what she'd hoped to capture. A self-portrait of an artist fully present, completely visible, undeniably herself. No shadows. No hiding. No making herself smaller to accommodate someone else's insecurity. Just Amelia Brooks, award-winning photographer, successful entrepreneur, woman who'd reclaimed every piece of herself that had been stolen, standing in her own light at last. She uploaded the photo to her computer and titled it simply, Self-Portrait, Age 38. Because that's what it was, not just a photograph, but a declaration. A testament to survival and transformation. A promise to herself that she would never again allow anyone to dim her light or question her worth. She was visible now. Undeniably, permanently, gloriously visible. And she was just getting started. The story that had begun with betrayal and pain had become a story of reclamation and triumph. And the best part? It was still unfolding, new chapters waiting to be written, new images waiting to be captured, new adventures waiting to be lived. All of it authentically, undeniably hers. Amelia smiled at her reflection in the dark window, raised her champagne glass one more time in solitary toast, and whispered to the woman looking back. We did it. We're finally free. And in the reflection's eyes, she saw the truth of those words shining back, clear, bright, and impossible to miss.